In 1927, when Hitchcock directed The Lodger, A Story of the London Fog, film had become a major international industry, a powerful medium of mass communication, and a great art. Hollywood was producing fast-moving films filled with romance and action. German studios were achieving unprecedented expressive effects with camera movement, set design, and lighting. The French were experimenting with subjective devices and other formal innovations. Scandinavians were probing disturbing areas of the human psyche. Soviet filmmakers were putting into practice their theories about the revolutionary potential of montage. And in Hitchcock's England, seeds were being sown for the documentary movement, which was to flower in the 1930s. By incorporating elements of all these national cinemas, Hitchcock found his own voice. The Lodger was the third film Hitchcock directed, but he always thought of it as the first true Hitchcock film. The Lodger is quintessentially Hitchcockian in the ways it calls upon us to attend at every moment to the camera. But Hitchcock's camera also manifests at once his godlike power over the world of the film and his outsideness to that world, the powerlessness to satisfy his own desires within the projected world. He is condemned, as we are, to being a ghost-like presence haunting the characters who dwell within the world of the film. Directing films was Hitchcock's calling. It was a deeply personal question for Hitchcock. What was revealed about him and what it made of him? For he was an artist and a man, torn between two incompatible worldviews. One was the fatalistic, darkly poetic view, encapsulated in his favorite Oscar Wilde line, "Each man kills the thing he loves," which was to find its fullest expression in Vertigo. The other was the more hopeful spirit that was to prevail in such films as Rear Window, North by Northwest, and Marnie. The Lodger is meant to be experienced as authored, but it's also meant to be experienced as a demonstration of the possibilities and necessities of what Hitchcock called the art of pure cinema. Within the world of The Lodger, the nature and relationships of love, desire, marriage, murder, and theater are at issue, as they will be in all subsequent Hitchcock thrillers. The Lodger opens with a view of a woman screaming. From the point of view of the woman's killer, we see what the murderer sees. The Avenger, as he calls himself, is a viewer like us. The Avenger enacts what can only be a fantasy for us and for the film's director. Then the lifeless body of a woman fades into vision. The next shot discloses that view to have been from the point of view of an old woman. The Lodger, like all Hitchcock thrillers, compels us to continually revise our understanding of what we have just seen. As the woman is telling her story, there's a cut to a man in the crowd who pulls up his collar, aping the woman's description of the murderer. When Hitchcock cuts to her view of this man, his image is distorted. She's frightened by this apparition. We're not, because Hitchcock had let us in on the joke. It's typical for Hitchcock to present us with views that mystify us because he has withheld information about their context. For example, in this passage, in which young women enter a dressing room and cluster around a copy of the Evening Standard. The camera isolates one whose blonde hair marks her as a potential Avenger victim. Then Hitchcock cuts to her point of view, and we see a knife-wielding figure rise into the frame. She's momentarily frightened, but laughs. This time, Hitchcock did not clue us in on the prank. He has declared his capacity for deceiving us. He's given us fair warning. This is one of the main strategies Hitchcock employs to make us increasingly suspicious of the Lodger. The more Hitchcock succeeds in making us believe that the Lodger really is planning to murder Daisy, the more we're aware that there's a director calling the shots. And the more suspicious we become about that director's intentions toward us. Is he planning to make us view what we dread viewing? A shot of a reporter telephoning in the story segues to a documentary-like account of the process by which the Evening Standard is produced and distributed. Blackmail, Hitchcock's first sound film, begins with another documentary-like sequence depicting Scotland Yard's procedures in apprehending a criminal. But Hitchcock's treatment of the newspaper has a critical edge. The Evening Standard sells newspapers by whetting readers' appetite for scenes of violence that they desire to imagine, yet dread imagining. And the appetite for erotic violence that sells newspapers sells movie tickets too. That Hitchcock means the Evening Standard's readers to represent allegorically the lodger's viewers is underscored by two clever touches. First, as a van carrying bales of newspapers drives into the depths of the frame, two heads, visible through oval windows, move back and forth as though they were eyes. Second, Hitchcock cuts from a group of men all eagerly reading a single newspaper to a large crowd of men watching something, to all appearances a movie. When Hitchcock now cuts to this audience's point of view, we understand retroactively that these men are reading the sensational news of the latest Avenger murder. Characteristically, Hitchcock doesn't exempt himself in his indictment of the lodger's viewers. Hence, he makes his first ever cameo appearance in the Evening Standard sequence, screened from the action, which he almost seems to be directing, framed with his back to the camera, as the lodger himself will repeatedly be. From the Evening Standard, the film extends its indictment to radio. All these faces seem to coalesce into one face, with alternating male and female aspects, the composite face of the radio listeners who are also the lodger's viewers. A title reading simply Daisy is followed by a shot of a beautiful young blonde, played by June Tripp. Our apprehension increases when Hitchcock cuts to a newsboy hawking the Evening Standard and back to Daisy. Only then is it disclosed retroactively that she's a model at a fashion show displaying her elegant and expensive ensemble and herself. When Hitchcock cuts to a much longer shot, seemingly from the point of view of an unseen audience member, it awakens our suspicion that, as in the film's opening shot, what we're seeing represents the Avenger's view. Daisy has attracted his murderous gaze. Daisy's two introductions reflect a conflict basic to the narrative. She appears fated for marriage to Joe, but that would mean the end of her dreams of wealth and freedom, her dreams of romance. Daisy is the first of a long line of Hitchcock heroines faced with such a predicament. Among them, the women in Blackmail, Young and Innocent, Rebecca, Suspicion, Shadow of a Doubt, Stage Fright, Vertigo, Psycho, and Marnie. Daisy harbors no secret that Hitchcock withholds from us, nor does she mask her feelings the way Joe does. Daisy, like her descendants, doesn't know her true feelings because they haven't yet been formed. She's in the process of discovering who she is, who she wishes to become. Only in the course of the film will she come to know herself, to be herself. That we don't know what she really feels about Joe after the doe heart charade is a reflection of her identity as a character, who she is in relationship with others in her world and with herself. Her identity is also a reflection of her particular relationship to Hitchcock's camera, which acknowledges and respects her inner life, but has only limited access to it. Like Daisy, Joe is the original of a recurring Hitchcock type. He is closely related, for example, to blackmail's Frank. Joe may not cut a romantic figure in Daisy's eyes or in ours, but he has one major asset. He can make her laugh. Indeed, some of Joe's descendants in Sabotage, Shadow of a Doubt, and Stage Fright, for example, ultimately win the women they love. It's only as a consequence of his own actions that Joe forfeits any chance of winning Daisy. No longer playing the swaggering braggart, Joe is now casting himself as a forlorn suitor whose heart has been broken. But the images of Joe's hand pressing on the cookie cutter, forcing it to cut through the dough, and the image of his hands tearing the heart reveal, even as they mask, a violence in his nature. However, we attribute to Joe little or no consciousness of the repressed violence in his nature. Thanks to Hitchcock's camera, we know Joe better than he knows himself. The process by which he disqualifies himself as a suitor, which the film precisely delineates, introduces another recurring Hitchcock theme: the consequences, tragic in Vertigo, anything but tragic in, say, Spellbound or Marnie, of letting one's desires influence one's judgments or professional responsibility. Near the end of the film, Joe comes upon the lodger and Daisy under a street lamp in a deserted square. Now he really is a forlorn suitor whose heart has been broken. Hitchcock cuts to what Joe literally sees. In a brilliant stroke, Hitchcock turns the muddy footprint into a screen on which is projected what Joe is conjuring in his mind's eye. A private film he's viewing and directing. From his reaction, we know that Joe now knows, or thinks he knows, that the lodger is the avenger. He wants this to be true because it would solve in one stroke both his professional problem, he's been assigned the avenger case, and his personal problem, eliminating his hated rival. Thanks to Hitchcock's camera, Joe is an open book to us. Hitchcock introduced Daisy by presenting a view of her, but he introduces the lodger by presenting his view. That is, by making the camera assume his place, as it had assumed the Avenger's place in the film's opening shot, making the lodger visible as a shadow before his hand enters the frame, in the flesh. In the 39 Steps, Hitchcock will introduce Hannay, the Robert Donat character, in essentially the same way. The man at the door, come to rent a room, is played by the film's star, Ivor Novello, the beloved romantic lead. Yet the first time we see him, he's the very picture of the Avenger as Hitchcock had set us up to envision him. The lodger is haunted by a secret. At one level, the film tells the story of his coming to confess this secret to Daisy and her response, which expresses her faith in him. Until that moment, the lodger exists in an anguished state of suspense. He dreads seeing himself reflected in the eyes of anyone who might see him as he really is. He's the original of yet another recurring Hitchcock character type. Laurence Olivier in Rebecca, Cary Grant in Suspicion, Joseph Cotton in Shadow of a Doubt, Richard Todd in Stage Fright, and even Anthony Perkins in Psycho, among others, play what might be called lodger figures. In this character's case, too, who he is within the film's world can't be separated from his relationship to the camera. And Hitchcock's camera seems to identify with the lodger, the way it seemed to identify with the Avenger. There's a cut to a sign reading "Room to Let." The mother, adopting the obsequiousness of the landlady toward the potential tenant, points to the stairs. This is a striking framing that will recur in later Hitchcock thrillers, most notably in Psycho. The lodger stares into the depths of this frame, reinforcing our impression from the previous shot that he is turned inward. The camera gives us no access to the scene he's envisioning in his mind's eye. It's a recurring Hitchcock strategy to engender the impression of a mysterious connection between an imagined scene and a real scene. After Daisy's mother, showing the lodger the room to let, turns on the lights, the camera, following his gaze, pans along the wall to a painting of a beautiful woman with long blonde hair. Then Hitchcock cuts again to the lodger to yet another pan across a painting of a blonde. But this shot ends by framing a painting depicting an incident in the life of St. George. He is freeing a woman chosen to be sacrificed to the dragon. But is the lodger here allegorically to rescue Daisy, or is he the dragon? The sight of this last painting provokes a quick cut to the most remarkable shot of the film. The lodger is staring in the direction of the camera. Behind him is a painting framed in a frame within the frame. The way he's staring ahead into the middle distance creates the impression that he is again turned inward, absorbed in a scene he is envisioning in his mind's eye. But as he steps forward, his movement causes his figure in the frame to be doubled by an image of himself with his back to the camera. In the frame within the frame, we now know is a mirror. Unreal though she is, the woman in the painting holds him in thrall, as if with the power of her gaze. He is viewing her from outside her world, just as we are outside the projected world that holds us in thrall. Uncannily, objective reality and the lodger's subjective reality, the painting he's seeing and the scene he is envisioning in his mind's eye, our world and the projected world are fused. I've dwelled at such length on this shot because it's one of the most astonishing in the film, and because so many of Hitchcock's most memorable passages are indebted to it. In the celebrated passage in The Wrong Man, the camera moves in, seeming to be pulled by the painted Jesus's gaze. Thus, the following close-up of Manny feels like a shot from Jesus' point of view, and it is over this shot that the thrilling dissolve takes place. The passage in Vertigo in which Scotty recognizes the telltale necklace offers another variation.
I'm just about ready. All I've got to do is find my lipstick. I wonder where I put it. I had it a minute ago.
For a lingering moment, Scotty's eyes are superimposed over the frame of the painting. When Hitchcock made The Lodger, it was already essential to his way of thinking about film as a medium and as an art, that in the world on film, the common sense opposition between what is objectively real and what is real only subjectively is overcome or transcended. Later in The Lodger, the mother is cleaning his room. Hitchcock cuts to the lodger in the hall. The shadowy, expressionistic shot, evocative of her darkening mood, feels like a shot from her point of view, although the mother can't literally see what Hitchcock gives us to see. What we're seeing is really happening, but it coincides with what she is imagining. Hitchcock has the power to make his characters' fantasies, dreams and nightmares they may not even be conscious of harboring, magically come true. Daisy's mother is clairvoyant. What's real coincides with what she envisions in her mind's eye, however she may go on to misinterpret it, because Hitchcock chooses to make it coincide. The same can be said of the other women in his films to whom Hitchcock grants clairvoyance. For example, Alice in Blackmail who imagines, even as it is actually happening, the chase that ends in the death of the man accused of murdering the artist Alice herself had killed. The celebrated Albert Hall sequence in both versions of The Man Who Knew Too Much climaxes when the heroine screams at the moment that, in her clairvoyance, she envisions the assassin's gun taking aim at its would-be victim. And in Family Plot, Hitchcock's last film, Blanche turns out to possess the clairvoyance she thought she was only pretending to have. When Hitchcock cuts from the shot of Daisy near the front door to a shot looking up at the lodger, the shot of Daisy is retroactively disclosed to be from the lodger's point of view. As she turns toward the camera, a shadow enters the frame and expands until it totally eclipses her. Then the shadow morphs into the lodger in the flesh. Visually, the effect is like the passing of a dark cloud or the raising of a curtain. This eclipsing effect is a trope or motif that Hitchcock uses again and again in his films, as in this passage from the 39 Steps. And the curtain-raising effect, too, becomes a recurring Hitchcock motif. This from Murder, and this from Vertigo. Beneath the surface of every Hitchcock thriller, or rather on the surface, the movie screen is a surface, and hidden from us only by being in plain view, is a panoply of recurring motifs first introduced in The Lodger. They include the various lamps that in one way or another figure significantly in almost every scene, the dark curtains that in Hitchcock almost always are associated with theater, the cuckoo, the bird whose cry rivets the lodger's attention, and the black handbag that holds the key to his mystery. And lamps, birds, and handbags, later joined by flowers and jewels, among others, all become recurring motifs. In The Lodger, as in all Hitchcock thrillers, lamps retain their conventional association with enlightenment. After all, it's under the street lamp that the lodger reveals the truth to Daisy. But lamps, like the other symbolically charged objects, also accumulate associations, resonances, within each film and from film to film, investing them with a cryptic, private dimension particular to Hitchcock's authorship. Taken together, these signature motifs, as they reappear in successive films, create an ever denser web of echoes and cross-references, embedding the past in the present in the future, in a way only film makes possible. Each signature motif has a self-referential dimension. Frames within frames, for example, can serve Hitchcock as natural metaphors for the film frame. Circles for the lens that's the camera's eye. And lamps, well, projectors are lamps, literally as well as figuratively. At another level, Hitchcock's signature motifs also serve as visible manifestations of an erotic, shadowy realm of desires and dreads that the light of reason can't penetrate. A realm that, in Hitchcock's understanding, as in Freud's, plays a mysterious role in scripting and directing all our conscious experience. Freud links purses and circles symbolically with female sexuality, so does Hitchcock, for example, in Marnie. In The Lodger, Hitchcock emphasizes the phallic shape of the lamppost by the way he places it in precise relationship to the top frame line, offering visual testimony to the irrational force of male sexuality that is unleashed in this dreamlike setting. My favorite instance of Hitchcock's coded invocations of male sexuality is in Blackmail. In a subjective shot from Alice's point of view, this phallic cocktail shaker metamorphoses into a knife. The knife repeatedly stabs at the first half of the word cocktail. Near the end of Psycho, Hitchcock slowly dissolves from the mummified corpse to the county courthouse. For a lingering moment, what is superimposed over the mummy's empty eye sockets is what I call Hitchcock's prison bar motif. Its first occurrence is the shot in The Lodger that we already noted for its expressionism. A typical use of the prison bar motif occurs in the 39 Steps. Visually, the prison bars signify that Hannah is trapped. He's arrived at an impassable barrier. Thus, the prison bar motif can serve Hitchcock as what I think of as a natural metaphor for the movie screen, the impassable barrier separating the projected world from our world. The lodger is imprisoned in his world. We are imprisoned in ours. Late in the film, when the lodger finally tells Daisy his secret, the flashback begins with an amazing shot in which the camera, again assuming the Avenger's point of view, magically passes through the grillwork on a glass door. The camera has moved to a place where, like us, it looks in on that space from the outside. This is another shot whose possibilities and implications Hitchcock will never stop thinking about. As witness this from Murder, in which Hitchcock's camera makes a magical transition from being inside to being outside Diana's prison cell. Or the final shot of Vertigo, in which the camera makes a similar transition to a place no human being could possibly occupy. After the shot in which the lodger is doubled by his mirror image, Hitchcock cuts to an equally striking shot. Framing the lodger in profile denies us access to his expression. Indeed, the shot declares that we have reached a limit of our access to this character and to his world. Profile shots of the lodger occur almost as frequently as shots in which Hitchcock frames the lodger with his back to the camera, the way Hitchcock frames himself. Both are among the signature motifs that first appear in The Lodger and then reappear in every Hitchcock thriller. The sequence climaxes with a shot of the lodger at the window. The shadow that runs up and down the lodger's face marks him with the sign of the cross. The shadow also divides his face in two. A shadow again splits the lodger's face, this time between a dark side and a light side. In his first use of what becomes a staple of his technique, Hitchcock employs a slow dissolve to superimpose the lodger's divided face with a shot of him and his dying mother at opposite ends, a shot that divides the entire frame into a dark side and a light side. Like Norman Bates, the lodger is a divided or split character. At the end of Psycho, we don't know whether it's the mother half of Norman or Norman himself grinning at the camera. In a sense, the lodger, too, has a mother half. In his project of tracking down and killing the Avenger, he is keeping the promise his dying mother exacted from him, acting as the executor of her will. Where does his mother's self end and his own self begin? Indeed, the lodger is doubly split. When he discloses his secret to Daisy, we learn that he's not the Avenger, but he is an Avenger. To track down the Avenger, the lodger has to be able to think like him. Daisy is his kind of woman, but he knows that she's the Avenger's kind of woman, too. The lodger knows the Avenger's mind as if from the inside, the way Hitchcock knows the lodger's mind. Within the film's world, the Avenger is real, but he's also a projection of the lodger's imagination. That the lodger fears that the Avenger half of himself might be his true self explains his impulse to push Daisy away until her faith in his innocence overcomes his terrible self-doubt. When the lodger tries to escape the bloodthirsty mob, Hitchcock's prison bar motif reappears. It would take a miracle for him ever to escape. The film we are watching has awakened our compassion, but it has also whetted our appetite for violence. We too are divided or split. The miracle happens. A newsboy providentially appears with the news that the avenger had just been caught, and the mob backs off. Ironically but fittingly, it's the Evening Standard, with Joe's help, that saves the lodger. Or rather, the Evening Standard is the agent by which Hitchcock performs that miracle. Hitchcock acknowledges his responsibility for the lodger's suffering and ours, but also his ambivalence, the fact that Hitchcock, too, is divided or split, by making an encore cameo appearance as a member of the mob who seems visibly disappointed to be deprived of the killing he had desired. When Hitchcock cuts from himself to the unconscious lodger and then to a closer Pietà-like shot, both shots seem to be from Hitchcock's own point of view, the God who made this happen, but we can't tell whether he's alive or dead. This feels like the film's true ending. Hitchcock acknowledges his responsibility and his ambivalence in another way. He emulates Murnau's The Last Laugh by giving the lodger a second ending, a strategy he would go on to employ in The Wrong Man, among other films, and in the many episodes of Alfred Hitchcock Presents in which Hitchcock reappears after the story ends to explain that the perpetrator was later caught and punished, but also to make clear that the show's sponsors made him say this. Everything that follows feels unreal, and yet what feels like the film's true ending is actually no more real and no more unreal than the happy ending. The Lodger ends, as perhaps every Hitchcock thriller does, with an acknowledgement that its world is not reality. It is reality transformed by the medium of film and by the art of pure cinema that medium makes possible.